Over the past several days, I've read and listened to many Rosh Hashanah sermons from my colleagues. Some carried titles like, "The Big Scary Sermon About Israel and Gaza." It's not a laughing matter, but those have been the titles. Each began with caveats, apologies, and explanations. Some were powerful, others fell flat, depending, of course, on the politics of the listener. I will not be giving that sermon tonight. But I feel it would be irresponsible of me not to acknowledge the shadow that the crisis in Israel and Gaza casts over all of us. The war in Gaza, the horrors of October 7th, the fate of the hostages, the devastation of life and land, all of it hovers over this room, whether we name it or not. It lives in our prayers, our tears, our divisions, our longing for peace. To speak of justice tonight, which I am about to do, without acknowledging the conflict and its impact on all of us would be dishonest. And yet, I will not speak directly about Israel and Gaza for two reasons. First, I'm a visitor here. I do not know the full breadth and depth of the positions, experiences, and passions you all bring into this room. These conversations need to be conducted within the context of long-established relationships built on trust, and I urge you to do that, and I applaud you for starting already. And secondly, as we've been saying since Rosh Hashanah, this is where we are. We live in the United States in the early 21st century. It is here that we are most directly shaped, and here that we are most urgently needed. We claim as Reconstructionists to live in two civilizations, but in truth, it is the American civilization that shapes our daily life, our culture, our politics. Tonight, I want to speak about justice where our feet are planted, and who will we be here in the coming year. I want to urge us to practice bravery and answer the prophetic call that we will hear tomorrow morning, right here in our own communities. To explore that, I'll take us back into history and overseas. Paul Gruninger was a Swiss police commander in the late 1930s. He was tasked with enforcing strict border laws. When Jewish refugees fleeing Austria arrived at the Swiss border without proper papers, Gruninger quietly falsified documents, altered dates, and allowed them entry. He was discovered, dismissed from his position, stripped of his pension, and prosecuted. He lived most of the rest of his life ostracized and poor. Decades later, of course, he was recognized at Yad Vashem as one of the righteous among the nations. Survivors and their families told how he had saved hundreds, and in generations later, thousands of lives. When asked, Gruninger explained his choices simply. My personal well-being, measured against the cruel fate of these thousands, was so insignificant and unimportant that I never even took it into consideration. I never even took it into consideration. That is what bravery looks like. Not fearlessness, but the willingness to let someone else's life matter more than your comfort, your reputation, even possibly your safety. Bravery is never abstract. It's made of choices. Gruninger's choices were costly, but they were also ordinary. Signing papers, shifting dates, saying yes when others said no. Many of us in this room owe our lives or the lives of our families to such ordinary people. people who risked their livelihood, safety, and sometimes their lives to do what was necessary. They could not live as if everything was normal in an extraordinarily abnormal time. We call them righteous Gentiles, righteous among the nation, people who use their small bit of authority, their little bit of privilege to save strangers, and in doing so, save us. Here we are in the United States in 2025, living in a time when dehumanizing authoritarianism and creeping fascism are all around us. Several weeks ago, I witnessed an ICE raid on the Gigante supermarket in Norristown, Pennsylvania. 20 officers in masks and full-body armor stormed a grocery store as if it were a battlefield. They put snipers on the roof. They had a warrant for one man, one individual accused of tax fraud. They arrested 14 workers. No warrants, no charges. They just swept them up, and they called them collateral. I sat with the families afterward. One woman waited 36 hours before learning her husband had already been deported. Another discovered that there would be no bail, as we know, no hearing, no chance. Mothers asked how they would pay for groceries, provide childcare, pay for lawyers, given that their partners, often the sole breadwinners in their families, were simply disappeared. Many were taken to the Moshannon Valley Processing Center, the largest ICE detention center in the Northeast. And here's what we know about conditions at Moshannon. Solitary confinement is used as a punishment for people who complain about the way they are being treated. Food is inadequate. Temperatures are kept at 66 degrees and only the thinnest blankets are provided. Guards pressure detainees nightly to see if they will self-deport. And the private companies, the private corporations like Core Civic and Geo Group profit millions of dollars each month to keep the beds full. Cruelty is not a byproduct. Cruelty is the point. And you know that this is not only true in Pennsylvania, but it is most definitely true here in Georgia. In your state, you are home to some of the largest detention centers in the country. Stewart in Lumpkin, which I know many of you have visited, and Folkestone in Charlton County, soon to be one of the largest ICE facilities in the nation, with a capacity for over 3,000 people. This year alone, 2 men have died in ICE custody in Georgia. Reports tell of people sleeping on floors, denied medical care, mocked by guards, punished with solitary confinement. Just weeks ago, nearly 500 workers were detained in a raid at a Hyundai plant outside of Savannah, many of them Korean nationals, some with valid visas. To be clear, this is not about safety. This is not about law. This is about profit. Our Torah commands, "You shall love the stranger, for you were strangers in the land of Egypt." It says this 36 times in the Torah. This is not sentiment. It is a law born of memory. We know the taste of fear. We know the ache of displacement. We know what it is to be unwelcome. Our people have lived this history, arriving undocumented, surviving because someone risked kindness. Many of our own families were saved only because someone took risks for us. To remember that history and do nothing is to betray it. I know this community already lives into that memory. Beit Chavarim has stood in solidarity with immigrant communities in Atlanta. You have partnered with El Refugio, writing letters, visiting detainees, and accompanying families making the long journey to Stewart Detention Center. You have supported resettlement through International Rescue Committee and the New American Pathways, helping families furnish apartments, enroll children in school, and navigate a Kafkaesque system. Members of this community have marched, protested, written letters, and shown up when immigrants were most at risk. This is no small thing. You have already shown bravery. You have already risked comfort for the sake of conscience. But tonight, the Torah and the Times ask more of us. The title righteous, righteous among the nations, is never self-proclaimed. It is bestowed by history on those who risk comfort for the sake of conscience. Paul Gruninger was not a hero in his own time. He was an unemployed outcast. And yet history remembers him as righteous. I worry what my grandchildren will think of me. We remember him as brave. Will they remember us as brave? Bravery is not something we either have or don't. It is something that we can practice. You here at Beit Chavarim already know how. You've demonstrated bravery by showing up at detention centers and being with families. But going deeper, getting braver, requires more than just showing up. It actually requires stepping into the discomfort of life as it really is, not the life as we would like it to be. Bravery demands that we move toward situations that unsettle us, that stretch the boundaries of what feels safe and familiar. It asks us to trade ease for conscience. Being brave might mean speaking when our words falter, when our understanding is incomplete, and when the consequences feel unpredictable. It might mean sitting in a room with someone whose language we barely understand and listening long enough to let their story reshape us. It might mean spending a morning outside a detention center under the hot sun, carrying water for someone we've just met, while our own bodies beg for shade and rest. It might mean opening your car to a perfect stranger to drive him home late at night after being released from a detention center 3 hours away from where he lives. It might mean opening your wallet or your heart to people that you don't know well, knowing you cannot control the outcome. It is in these moments, the moments where comfort is sacrificed, where fear and uncertainty knock at our door, that bravery grows. We learn to tolerate the discomfort of being someplace unfamiliar and uncomfortable. We learn to tolerate the unease that comes from seeing injustice up close. We learn to tolerate the embarrassment of not having any answers. Each step into discomfort strengthens the muscle of courage, making the next act easier, making the next yes more possible. And importantly, most importantly, bravery is not something we practice as individuals. It must be communal. None of us can sustain courage alone, but together as a kihila, as a sacred community, we can. Bravery grows when we remind each other that we are not alone. It builds when we act together, mentor each other to do the things that are hard. It builds when those with experience who've been at those detention centers invite others to join them. It builds when those who are more timid seek out buddies and say, I want to do this, but I'm scared and I don't know how. It builds when all of us are more public with our work, letting others know and be encouraged by our actions. I know that it takes a bit of chutzpah for me to come here, a visitor, and stand in Atlanta and call you deeper into this work. But this is the sermon that I needed to hear for myself. I also know that many of you already feel incredibly vulnerable by the world we are in. Queer and trans family members, those targeted by hate, those whose livelihood has been destroyed by this regime's policies. But we know that all of these struggles are intertwined. The fight for immigrant dignity is inseparable from the battles for queer safety, racial justice, and the integrity of democracy itself. What I battle in Montgomery County, Pennsylvania, is exactly the same struggle that you battle here in DeKalb County, Georgia, against a system that profits by grinding human beings into fear. That doesn't mean that we all have to take the same risks. We all have to judge that for ourselves. What I'm asking is that you go one step further. Our levels of support and engagement can vary. However, we must acknowledge that the fight for immigrant rights, for welcoming the stranger, is the fight we cannot ignore, not only because we were once strangers, not only because it is the right thing to do, but also because we know how the poem ends. Then they came for me, and there was no one left to speak for me. None of us can afford to believe that our comfort, our ease will protect us. Our bravery, a bravery many of us have never known, is necessary. It is what is needed to build the world that we envision that feels further than ever, going a step or two beyond our comfort zone. Make that 3 or 4 steps beyond our comfort zone is the bravery we are called to exhibit, the bravery that our prophets demand of us, the bravery that Isaiah will shout at us to exhibit tomorrow morning. On this Day of Atonement, I pray, and I ask you to join me in this prayer, that our commitment to welcoming strangers, our knowledge of our own history, and our acceptance of the yoke of responsibility that this day, this holiday, demands of us, make us brave. May our tears for those who are most directly targeted water the seeds of courage. Our names can only be inscribed in the book of life, not because we retreated into safety. That book is not about being safe, but because we dared to risk our safety for the sake of others. My prayer tonight is that we, like Paul Gruninger, who didn't give a moment's thought for his well-being and comfort, turn that phrase, righteous among the nations, upside down, and that we Jews stand as righteous among the nations because the nations need us. Gemar Chatima Tova.